Invite up the next session to get ready. So I'm delighted to introduce Mark Vandenberg, who's the new Managing Director at the GCVI Climate Investments Fund. He joined at the end of last year. And sort of Mark brings a fantastic track record, and he, on behalf of Black 49, are going to be talking with Jim Laurie, CEO of Stanley Black & Decker, as well as obviously Dina Routier, who's the president of Stanley Ventures. So come up on the stage, Mark, Dina, and Jim. Welcome. Great to see you.
Thanks. Fantastic. Y'all hear me? Yes. All right, good. If you can hear me, clap once. First mistake, right? Once. If you can see us, clap twice. Good. Now people don't have their cell phones in their hands. So my daughter's a teacher, so I learned that. Welcome, and glad to be here with many people that I know and have worked with in the past. We are privileged to have an esteemed couple here, CEO of Stanley Black & Decker, James Laurie, and the head of their global venture practice, Dina Routier. I am Mark Vandenberg. As was introduced, I run a global climate tech fund called OGCI. It's a multi-billion-dollar platform, and we do everything from sort of seed to growth. I'm here in Silicon Valley, but we have offices in London, Houston, and Beijing. So without further ado, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Mach 49, because although I'm here with OGCI, I was invited by Mach 49. Many of you know them, and I would give Paul Holland and Kevin Yee a lot of credit for helping develop this CVC ecosystem. And Kevin is here this week, so if you get a chance to say hi to him, please feel free to introduce yourself. So with that, I'm going to do a quick intro. Jim is kind enough to come tell us some stories today, I hope. He joined Stanley Black & Decker in 1999 from GE. So he's been with them a long time, took over after being CFO for a while as CEO in 2016. And if you look at the transaction and transformation of Stanley Black & Decker from 2016 to today, it's been quite remarkable. I think, Jim, when you started, revenues were like in the $2 billion range, and now like 8 times that or something.
Yeah, 1999, it was around $2 billion.
Yeah.
2016, $11 billion. This year, it's going to be 22 minus $2 billion of security, our security business, which we're selling. So it'll be 20. But really doubling the size of the company in 6 years.
That's fantastic. Great. And your colleague, Dina, who I've gotten to know, runs their global venture practice. Dina, I think you took that role in 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, actually, we started, under Jim's auspices, we started the corporate venture team in early 2016, and I actually had a predecessor, and I was hired by that predecessor in late 2017, and then he retired in late 2020, and it was at that point that I took over management of the group.
Fantastic. And something like 48 to 50 portfolio companies already.
We've made 42 investments to date.
Yeah.
We've exited several. Actually, Stanley has acquired
Exits
at least
are good.
3. Exits are good. Acquisitions are good. Although I will say acquisitions are not our stated mandate, but in certain circumstances, the synergies become so clear that so it just makes it imperative to acquire that company. So we have 36 active companies today in the portfolio.
What I thought we'd do, because I want this to be a living room conversation, is to kind of kick off, Jim, with you. When you took over CEO, obviously there's a global company, 100 factories, 60,000 employees, right? There's an R&D organization. You build a lot of interesting products, but something drove you to sort of promote a new level of culture around innovation. And so I'd just sort of like to hear you tell that story of the start and then take us to the present day with it.
Sure. So joined in 1999, 10 years as the CFO, so then it takes us to 2009. And then I was the COO for 7 years. And kind of about 2 years before I took over as the CEO, it wasn't a guarantee, but it looked like I was going to be the CEO. And so I thought, here's this company which was founded in 1843, almost 175 years old at the time. And I'm going to take it over, and I'm really immersed at that time in all of what was going on with respect to the accelerating pace of technological change. First, it was the digital revolution, and then it started becoming obvious that it wasn't just the digital revolution, it was the revolution, and everything was moving faster. And we spend, 1.5% of sales on R&D, and very efficient, by the way. We've been named one of the most efficient R&D spenders in the country, but by PwC. So I mean, we don't have a lot of money to spend, but we've got a challenge on our hands, which is this idea that innovation has been democratized, and everything's moving faster. And oh my God, what are we going to do? So I had a lot of time to think, about what we were going to do and study. And what I figured out when I took over the role, that I would have a platform. And that platform would be 3 prongs. One would be performance, second would be innovation, and the third would be social responsibility. And I didn't know it at the time, but the synergy associated with the combination of those 3 things is unbelievably strong. So innovation, anything on that, in that 3-pronged platform, we were going to do with zeal. We were going to make it happen. Black & Decker had a history of innovation, if you think back over the decades. So did Stanley. So there was something there to work with. There was a legacy. But the world was changing. And so I decided, with the help of my colleagues, that we would, in the innovation area, that we would create an ecosystem approach. And so that began with the core innovation, which is the day-to-day stuff that everybody does. And then we came up with this idea of breakthrough innovation, which is, the classic sort of skunk works type of thing, where you set some people off on the side and you let them just do big things. And then on top of that, we decided to do some acceleration with Techstars. We did some internal incubation with our Stanley X organization out in the Valley. And then lastly, and not least, we decided to embark upon this corporate venturing initiative. And so we set it up. We said the combination of all those things are going to work together in this area of innovation, and we're going to become the most innovative company in our space and one of the more innovative companies in industry. So 6 years later, I look back and I say, wow, we really did it. It's been a cultural transformation, and all of those things that are going on. By the way, we also hired a chief technology officer, which, if you think, a mechanical company, it's a historically, power tools, hand tools, things like that. So we hired a chief technology officer. He's with us today, Mark Mayberry, and he kind of oversaw, in a team-oriented kind of a way, collaborative way, all these different things going on. And like I said, we doubled the size of the company in 6 years, a combination of acquisitions and organic. It's had a fantastic organic growth rate. We've commercialized a number of innovations. A number of innovations have been targeted towards ESG and social responsibility. And we made a lot of progress on DE&I, and I think that's helped as well.
I do want to touch on that later. By the way, I did make sure I talked to the organizers that this stage was assembled with Craftsman and DeWalt tool sets. I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear about that. Thank you, Jim. Let me turn to Dina real quick. It's not often we get the head of the venture capital from a CVC here alongside their chief sponsor for that thing. So it could either make for a very curated set of answers from you, but I actually think it's going to be pretty fun dynamic. So Dina, I would just sort of ask you to reflect on the venture platform, the initiative, how it works together with the incubators, accelerators, all the stuff that's going on inside Stanley, and then really kind of emphasize the corporate sponsorship side and Jim's role in that.
Absolutely.
I think I'll just turn the mic over.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, I'd like to start by saying, if it doesn't, I truly believe it does, if it doesn't come from the top down and is supported by the C-suite of an organization, it is really difficult for a group like a CVC to flourish within a large company, because our goal is to work with the business units. And especially as a large public company, those business unit heads are really focused on making the quarter. Yet it is our stated mission to help those business unit leadership teams look out to see what's coming around the corner that may disrupt them in the future. And so some of the more sort of Horizon 2, Horizon 3 type opportunities, which we truly know we need to be involved in, it can be difficult sometimes to convince those leaderships to really focus on those things. And so it's in those circumstances where that senior leadership support that we've had from Jim and our CFO has been so critical. So in those instances where we are unable to get business unit leadership support for a particular forward-thinking investment, it is Jim that has supported those particular investments in spaces like drones, in spaces like additive manufacturing, and in some of the newer spaces that we're looking at today, like AI and quantum. And so that has absolutely been critical to have that support. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well said. Maybe just expand a little bit so that the rest of our colleagues here know the kind of things that you're focusing on
Sure.
inside the CVC arm. So as they think about
Absolutely.
opportunities for you all, you guys have common titles.
Sure. So our model is a little bit unique in the industry in the sense that when we make an investment, at the very same time we make that investment, we are forging that commercial partnership. And so we do spend a lot of time up front before closing that investment, really fleshing out what that commercial partnership will look like. And it can look anything from just a JDA, a co-development agreement, but oftentimes it involves us rebranding that company's technology and then reselling it through our amazing channels, both retail, as we have a massive dealer network now with our outdoor products business. And so we do spend a lot of that time fleshing that out. And then upon closing that investment, that's where the real work really does begin, because it's at that point that we need to make that commercial partnership really productive and generate new revenues for Stanley that we could not otherwise have generated in the same time frame. And so it is that work post-closing of the investment that I believe is truly the most important, because when I sit with Jim once a quarter to report out on the portfolio, his main question is how are those commercial partnerships being activated, and what are the revenues that we're generating from those commercial partnerships for us, and then how are we helping those startups scale? Because if they don't scale and succeed, then we don't succeed. And so that's just a little bit more about how we go about doing our work.
Got it. Well, you should reach out to Dina, because I've got to know her the last couple of days, and they've got some really exciting companies, and I think that's a great point of collaboration. Jim, you had talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion in your earlier remarks, and I was thinking a lot last night about how do you get this culture of innovation where you have executives both in the R&D side and business development, all to sort of not want to own it themselves and yet share what they've learned and work together. That's hard. Tell me a little bit about that and relate it to the DEI initiatives. And then I also know the ESG is a big focus. So maybe could you tie those two or three things together and how it works inside the culture for you all?
Yeah, I became very passionate about DE&I early on in my reign. In my first town hall, all-employee town hall, I basically said that we are going to be a workplace where we welcome everybody from all cohorts of society, and said things like, including women, LGBTQ, et cetera, people of color. And I mean, literally, it was almost like a gasp in the room. And there were two kinds of gasps. One was people that were shocked and did not necessarily agree. And then there were the other folks who were gasping because they couldn't believe that we were finally crossing that Rubicon. And I just was, hell-bent, for 6 years on, changing the culture, because I knew it would enhance the innovation. I knew it would, bring talent into the company. It's not a boring manufacturing company. It is an exciting company where, there's a lot happening in innovation and many, many other areas. And we started forming employee resource groups. We have 9 resource groups. We have over 10,000 people involved in them now. They were particularly useful during the pandemic, when people needed support systems, working parents, things like that. And now we just have this real feel, of an innovative company that values people, and people can be themselves, and it's really awesome. As far as ESG, we were always pretty good on the G, and pretty good on the E too. but the social, was something that the DE and I helped immensely with that. But on the E, with the carbon, especially the carbon, progress that needs to be made in society, we went, headlong into, Scope 1, Scope 2 targets by 2030 and Scope 3 targets by 2050, and really became well-versed in making that happen across the, whether it's packaging, whether it's zero waste to landfill, carbon reduction, all that stuff. And really have seen also, if you really want to be serious about ESG, you have to do all that, and you have to make sure that your products and your impact on, on society through the products and your install base is managed. And I really do believe that corporations can be a force for good, need to be a force for good in helping society solve some of the big problems that we have, whether it's equality or whether it's climate. There's a whole host of things, and they seem to be mounting by the day, by the way, I would say. And so, with that as a backdrop, we actually bought $3 billion worth of outdoor power equipment, gasoline-powered outdoor power equipment, and we're going to take the skills and the experience that we have in electrification, which is immense and vast, and we're going to convert the outdoor power equipment market to we're going to be the leader to convert the outdoor power equipment to electric power, and that has all sorts of fantastic implications in terms of what the carbon emissions are, the noise pollution, you name it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bad things associated with internal combustion outdoor power equipment. We now are the largest outdoor power equipment company in America, just almost overnight. We had $1 billion, we added 3, we're $4 billion there now. Wow. And it's an exciting time. So on all dimensions, the commitment to ESG is there.
And I'll just follow on to say what's fun about working at Stanley Black & Decker as a corporate venture professional is our business has been changing, right? So when I first arrived in 2017, we supported to a large degree our Stanley security business, which now we're divesting. And so I got a chance to learn a ton about physical and logical security. And now with our new outdoor products power equipment business, we're looking at tons of potential investments in autonomy and electrification. And so it's never been boring, which has been a wonderful thing. I think it would be different at a company that stayed static, but we've been changing, so it's made it really interesting.
One of the things that maybe is an advantage, maybe it's a difficult advantage, is SB&D, you have a proximity to your customers, unlike other big corporates, right? You get to see the buying pattern and the behavior of the customers in somewhat real time. Mm-hmm. By the way, on the ESG side, I looked at your annual report and the scorecard for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's pretty impressive. A downward trend in overall energy. So congrats to you guys for that. Dina, just as maybe tie in a couple things for me here. One for any entrepreneurs in the crowd, and one for your current portfolio, and how you facilitate this interaction between, say, Stanley X and the other innovation aspects of Stanley with the portfolio company that you guys back. Sure. And how would an entrepreneur in the crowd think about that in terms of you guys being a great partner?
Sure. I think for entrepreneurs, working with a large corporate that has all of these different tools at its disposal to assist
part of the
startup.
pun, tools at the
No pun. To really assist the startup is great, right? Because there are often times when a startup will approach the ventures team for consideration for an investment. And I would say 8 times out of 10, what that ends up becoming is a commercial-only partnership. And that's just as valuable for Stanley. We don't have to invest in the startup in order to add tons of value to that startup. We could end up becoming just a sell-through partner. And that helps Stanley and it helps the startup. So I love that when a startup comes to me, if it's not right for a venture investment, I can share with them introductions to our Stanley X organization, for example, to our Techstars organization, or right to the core business to talk about a commercial-only partnership. So I think that's what I'd like entrepreneurs to know about Stanley when they approach any one particular group.
I think the other thing that is really, really impactful is somebody mentioned, I think it was you, Dina, that these division people are really focused on quarters, and their horizon is not very long in terms of strategic horizon. So in today's world, I really do believe you need to be looking short, medium, long, and extra long. So, even 5 to 10 years out, you need to be looking at where is your company going, where is the world going, and how are you connecting those two dots. And so for us, a tool company and an outdoor power equipment company, largely now, it's really construction tech. So we kind of tell people that in Stanley X, and we tell Dina that, and we tell, in our Techstars thinking, we start accelerating, construction tech type firms. And so we tie it all together with a theme. And I think that helps knowledge transfer. It helps, make resources available. And then gradually, as time goes on, the divisions realize that they've got this ready-made platter they can eat from, be served. And they didn't have to do all the work, the years of research and activity to get to that point.
Good. I just wanted to let the audience know we are going to reserve a few minutes at the end for questions. So keep your mind rolling on things that maybe didn't get addressed here. So just FYI. Jim, on the extension of sort of where does SBD go from here and how you see the future, maybe just comment for us on the role of innovation, where SBD heads, how you think about organizational dynamics, all that stuff.
Yeah, I guess the first, some of folks probably know, but I'm retiring in a week. 64 years old, 23 years, 91 consecutive quarterly analyst calls.
You were telling me that last time.
And so, it is one of those things where, your legacy is whatever it's going to be, but you're turning over the company to somebody who I've groomed for 23 years. He's worked for me, and so I think we're in good hands. But every CEO is going to have a different spin on things, and so we want to make sure that spirit of innovation and that culture of innovation is not lost, because the world is only getting more complex. It's only moving faster and faster.
Yep.
And innovation is imperative to the long-term success and to thrive, to enable the company to thrive in the future. So I guess we can cross our fingers on the one hand. On the other hand, I think having that internal succession is going to with somebody who's participated in the formation of this this culture and framework and so on, I think it's going to be just fine. But it is something you worry a little bit about as you turn over. I'm sure, Dina, you worry a little bit about it too.
A little, yep. But there was a whole panel on this topic yesterday, which was really informative. And I would say there were a couple of points made there, which I think are so important, right? So Don Allen is taking over as CEO, and he's absolutely going to the business unit presidents and saying, what value has Ventures added to your business over the last 6 years, right? And I think what happens to Ventures in the future largely depends on what they say about that. And so I'm really proud that our team has spent a majority of our time really making sure that we stay very close to the business units and that we're proving our value to them on a day-to-day basis, so that when that question comes up, I'm confident that they say positive things about us and that we will continue on.
Well, and the numbers back it up too. When you look at what we've spent, what we've invested, what we've returned, the returns have been higher than the investment. Mm-hmm. We've had some exits that have been really good for the company, great for the company. We've had, at the margin, we've had competitive advantages on a lot of our core innovations that have come out of this. There's a lot of good intangible benefits, but what are we spending a year? A couple $1 million. The investments have been solid. So what's the point? It's all positive. It's a wonderful organization with a great track record, and we know innovation is incredibly important for the future.
Yeah. Well, I know Stanley Black & Decker is going to miss your leadership, but it sounds like you've made a successful transition to some new leadership. It'll be awesome as well. This is a question for both of you. I'm going to ask Dina to answer it first.
Okay.
So just for the audience's sake, the relationship between a CEO and a head of risk capital or the venture seems to be a critical element to a successful and sustainable practice. Like if there's one thing that you would recommend to our other CVC attaches here, what would that one thing be to make that relationship as most productive and long-standing as possible?
I would just say communicate. Use every opportunity you can as to its maximum impact when you have time with the CEO, because you don't get a ton of time.
Yeah.
So when you do get that time, make sure you're ready for it and make sure you're ready to talk about how you're adding value to the business. And so just, you can't communicate enough would be my overall advice.
And we have a process, at the company where every other week, so bi-weekly, we call it a business development meeting, which is an hour. And we use that meeting the beginning of the meeting is for large deals. So any large deals in the pipeline, medium size, even small deals, but not ventures.
Right.
And traditional acquisitions. And because we're an acquisitive company, we've done over 150 acquisitions in my tenure there. It's a process that really helps. We don't want people wasting a lot of time on things that we're not going to do, and we want to encourage and support our people on things that we are going to do. And so what we did several years ago was we added ventures to the agenda. And so after we get through the big stuff, then we start talking about
The fun stuff.
The fun stuff, yeah.
the smaller stuff, but more exciting stuff. So we actually go through, any pipeline. We go through deals that are they're contemplating. We talk about how, the fit, the strategic fit, why we would want to do that. Give feedback, and it just keeps that dialogue going on a regular basis. So we do meet quarterly, but nonetheless, we also meet biweekly.
That's right.
And Dina is really great about highlighting the people in her organization. She has some incredibly strong people, and they get to pitch these deals, as well, and they get exposure. And I think that is also a really important element of this.
Agreed.
That's great. I'm going to ask Dina a quick question. If there's an audience question, raise your hand and we'll call on you if we have enough time. We've got a couple minutes left. But Dina, when you're doing these discussions, these weekly discussions, when we all know ventures should be first more than the big, we all know that, right? But do you, in a portfolio update for Jim, do you start with the issues that are negative in the portfolio and end with the real positive ones, or do you go positive, negative, or do you bracket it?
I think in the little time I have, it's a big portfolio at this point, so I can't talk about every single one every single week. Yeah. And so I think if there's something that's at risk, I think it's critical for me to start with that, because I don't want any surprises. I would never want Jim to be surprised, and then you always want to end on a high note. So I always try to do that. So I'd say bad news first, end with good news would be my advice.
I've done the high, low, high. I've tried to do that thing, and I don't know if it's the right way to go. We're going to have some closing comments, but any questions in the audience? If we haven't addressed anything, I don't see any hands. Jim's on a tight timeline. Oh, right here. Please stand up and say your name and what organization you belong to, and if you can project, that would be great. In developing the ecosystem, what has been the biggest challenge for you and the organization, I think is the short question.
Biggest challenge in developing the innovation ecosystem?
Yeah.
Oh, clearly it's traditional thinkers in, kind of frontline management. So, at the top of the organization, second layer, you get pretty progressive thinkers who, are interacting on concepts and, willing to transform and so on. The frontline people are just trying to, keep their head above water, and in many cases they don't have sufficient guidance, training, even just exposure to some of the big issues that we're trying to solve and so forth. And I think this is almost universal, in large corporations where it's the middle, the layers that. Somehow, transformation takes forever to get there, and there are ways to expedite and accelerate that. But until you win them over and you get them operating in a really constructive, productive way, they can become a barrier. They are a barrier, and sometimes undermine what you're trying to do.
Terrific. We are at the sub-zero on the clock, so I think we need to wrap up. I wanted to personally thank Jim for you making the effort to come out. It was fabulous to have you here. Dina, absolute pleasure, and thank you both for your time on the panel today, and thank the audience for being bright and cheery here at 9-something in the morning. So, round of applause for our guests.
Thank you, Mark.